Live from Hollywood, California at the Improv Studios, it's The Nighttime Show with your host, Stephen Kramer Glickman. Tonight, we have our special guest, our head writer, Matt Walker. I'm your announcer, Mike Black. And our very special guest, star of Platoon, There's Something About Mary, The Thing, and the upcoming film, The Nice Guys, Keith David. And now, a man who wants your French fries more than you do, Stephen Kramer Glickman.
That's true. I do love French fries.
He stole mine last night.
Last night we were eating at the bar at the Hollywood Improv, which is where we tape the show, and it's a beautiful, beautiful club. And we were eating at the bar. I ordered a salad
and
French fries. And literally 15 comics walked by and were like,
Yeah.
you know, one cancels out the other.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, they're both delicious.
It's
all right.
amazing how unoriginal the comedians were.
Yeah, like one after another. Like
they cancel each other out.
They cancel each other out. Like, doesn't matter how old they are. Just everyone's got the same bullshit joke. But like, I want to jump right into this because we have an amazing guest today. We are super, super lucky to have. You guys know him from his work in the movie Platoon, Crash, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, The Thing, the voice of Spawn. I mean, the list goes on and on. Ladies and gentlemen, Keith David is here.
Woo! Thank you.
How are you, sir?
I'm great, but as you were talking in the opening, I just want to make one thing very clear.
Yes.
There were two things in this world that one never fucks with. One of them happens to be another man's fries.
The greatest.
It's so good.
I sent him that clip this morning because I was still stewing about it because it's so true.
God, Mike, you set him up on the best. That's the best damn punchline that ever happened. That is absolutely phenomenal.
And one of my favorite comedies ever. They used to play it on HBO practically every day. And I just love that movie, Men at Work.
I'll tell you, that's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
God, it's so funny.
It's tremendous.
Yeah, we were all kind of Keith. We were all kind of freaking out about having you on the show, but for completely different reasons. Like Matt couldn't stop talking, and he's like literally all day today was talking about Halo and how you're in Halo,
and more importantly, even you worked with what I consider to be America's greatest filmmaker, Ken Burns. Many times, Jackie Robinson was fantastic, so good, and your voice just adds so much to documentaries that are great in terms of topics anyways, but the way that they get presented with the voiceover work on those things is amazing.
Yeah, no, it's really phenomenal, man. I mean, your career is absolutely incredible, and like people from all different parts of this business just wish that they could have a quarter of the stuff that, I mean, you've done so many different types of things. I want to start at the beginning, or like start in the early stuff, if that's okay. Before
can I ask something then?
Sure, yeah.
I'm eager to do, because you brought up the greatest filmmaker ever. I thought you were surely going to mention what I was going to mention. On your IMDb, it says under uncredited that you were in Disco Godfather. And so I thought the greatest filmmaker ever, Rudy Ray Moore. What was that like working with?
Let's start there.
Well, I got to tell you, IMDb gets a lot of things right. There are films that you do that get renamed after you've done them. So I cannot consciously remember ever doing Disco Godfather. However, I might have done something and they renamed it. So, and I've never seen it. So, I'll take the credit. But I can't.
Well, I know
Fair
early in your career, before doing, I think it's before doing The Thing and before doing They Live and Hercules and Requiem for a Dream, before doing all these movies, you were on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Is that true?
Mr. Rogers was actually my first TV work.
Wow. Now, did you film that in Pittsburgh?
In Pittsburgh.
Okay, yeah, because I went to college there at Carnegie Mellon, and I remember we would see him every now and then because he lived on the other side of campus from the studio, and he would walk across the campus to get to work every day.
Wow.
And I saw him a couple times walking around. You're like, hey, there's Mr. Rogers. That's so cool.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a landmark show. What was that like for you, and how did you end up getting cast in?
It was
on that
fantastic. I was in Pittsburgh doing a play. I believe I was doing A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I don't remember how it came up, but they asked me if I would play this part on Mr. I would play. I think I was Keith David in the neighborhood of Southwood, and I was the. It might have been a video game or pinball machine fixer or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, somebody offered me a job, so I said,
Yeah.
And it was great meeting Mr. Rogers because he was a Presbyterian minister, and his ministry was to kids.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember watching him as a kid and thinking, Mr. Rogers, but as I got to know him, I mean, it was like, this guy is phenomenal. I mean, and Fred Lally, I think it was Fred Lally was the
Mailman?
Was the director.
Oh.
Paul Lally. And the shows were fantastic because they really taught kids about things and values and subjects and he didn't talk down to them. I remember one in particular was called War and Peace, and it was about how big wars can start out of little arguments and how differences of opinion and can lead to great wars without communication. And it was fantastic. I mean, he was really a phenomenal guy.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Seems like such an interesting place to be too. Like, where did you get to go and be on that set? Like on the
and I got to play with the puppets.
No way, really?
Oh yeah.
Saw the castle.
I mean, in fact, I played bass violin. We love you. We love you. And that was fantastic. I mean, it was really kind of funny. The first time I met Mr. Rogers, when you're doing on-camera stuff and you're in the makeup chair, if you to protect your collar, they will sometimes stuff tissues in your collar so that the makeup doesn't get on your shirt.
Right.
So the first time I walked into the studio and I'm just kind of standing there, and it was all strange and new to me, and this man walks up to me and goes, "Hi, I'm Fred Rogers. Welcome to the table." And there was something kind of surreal about it, but at the same time, what a nice man.
Yeah.
What a beautiful cat.
God, amazing. What did you after doing Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? Did you jump from that into movies, or were you doing theater?
I was doing theater. I did. I was raised in the theater.
You said you were doing Midsummer Night's Dream at the time. Which part did you play?
I played Oberon at the Pittsburgh Public Theater.
That's who I would have cast you.
Well, I've now done Midsummer 4 times.
Wow.
I've played Theseus. Haven't played Bottom yet, but I look forward to playing Bottom one day. Played Theseus, Oberon twice, and I played Hippolyta once.
Oh,
wow!
We did a jazz version of A Midsummer Night's Dream, a jazz improv version. Max Roach was the musical director.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God!
Very cool.
George Ferenz directed it, and we switched parts. The woman Sheila Dabney, who was playing Titania, doubled as Theseus.
Oh,
and
cool.
We did it in sort of World War II era. So she played Theseus as MacArthur, and I played Hippolyta as a geisha girl.
Oh my God!
So I had the white face and the wig and the kimono.
What era was
I only
this?
had one line, and that was "This is the silliest stuff I ever heard." And the funniest thing about it was, I mean, it was at the San Diego Rep, so they didn't have a lot of money, so there was not the kind of money to make me up to look like to look like a woman really.
Yeah.
So I came out and I took my curtain call, of course, as Oberon.
Yeah.
And sitting behind the director was some woman who, at the curtain call, "What happened to the woman that played Hippolyta?"
Like, somebody get her to the eye doctor.
Yeah.
Oh my God! So you were doing shows at San Diego Repertory Theater?
Yes, that's the only time I've played there.
Oh, was that at the Lyceum?
At the Lyceum, yeah.
Yeah. I did
Exactly.
plays at the Lyceum growing up as a kid. I used to do. I did like Oklahoma and a couple other musicals down there. Like when you start out in theater, have you gone and done Broadway? Have you done?
Yes, I've done. My first Broadway show was in maybe 1979, 1980.
Oh my God.
It was a play called The Lady from Dubuque.
Whoa.
Edward Albee play.
Wow. Have you done any musicals on Broadway?
I did Jelly's Last Jam.
No,
on Broadway,
you did not. Did you really?
Which
I
was started
love that
here,
musical.
Which was started here in Los Angeles at
Yes.
the Taper, and then the last show I did was called Hot Feet,
Wow.
which was a what do you call those? I think there's a name for it, but it was the music of Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Oh,
wow,
like a
that's
tribute
great.
sort of show. Yeah.
Jeez Louise.
No, I mean it had a book, and
Oh,
yeah.
but all
Yeah.
you know,
It's kind of like they do
like
there's
like
the
Mamma
ABBA
Mia,
one.
you know.
Yeah,
Right.
there's the
Yeah.
ABBA one. There's the Frankie Valli one. There's
Yeah.
a bunch of those.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God, that's incredible, man.
Did you know Steven was Shrek in Shrek the Musical?
That's where I got my start. Is I
Really?
played.
All
I
right.
played Shrek in all the Broadway workshops and readings of Shrek the Musical, all the way up in at 42nd Street Studios.
I saw it.
Yeah. I worked on it for 2.5 years, leading up to Broadway, and then right before it went to Broadway, I was replaced by Brian Darcy James,
Right, okay.
and then I came out to LA and did Big Time Rush, the Nickelodeon show, and it worked out fine. But
Yeah.
I've gone back a couple times, and I still audition for Broadway musicals like whenever I get a chance to,
Mhm.
because I mean that's like theater, and you kind of see that a lot with actors, is that like theater is like the soul to the
Well,
to the
that's
actor.
where you learn your craft. You know,
Yeah.
in the theater.
Yeah. Did you go to
Yeah.
school for it as well?
I did.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to the High School of Performing Arts. Then I went to SUNY at Purchase for a year, but I graduated from Juilliard.
Wow. Oh my God. When was this? I don't want to.
In the late 70s.
Oh my God.
1993. He
So
graduated
you were
in
1993.
Yeah.
It could be. It's a very. I have no idea.
Do you remember some of your classmates from that time? Like,
Of course, Boyd Gaines is a 3-time Tony winner.
Wow.
Lisa Baines, who's still active. I mean, Michael Butler, who's still he's teaching right now, I think, and directing. Robin Williams was in the class ahead of me.
Oh my God. Phenomenal.
I mean, a lot of really wonderful actors.
God, that's so incredible. And this was in Juilliard in New York.
Mhm.
You know what's so funny is that like I went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts here in Los Angeles, and then I went to the American Musical Dramatic Academy in New York.
At the Ansonia.
Yeah, at the Ansonia building. Yeah. Every single person that I went to school with at AMDA in New York, I'd say 90% of them are either on Broadway, on television, or on tour, like starring in some sort of Broadway show. 99% of every single person I went to ADA with here in Los Angeles, nothing. They're working at Applebee's, or they're married. Like they just gave up. And it was like it's a great school, ADA, out here in Los Angeles, but like LA is such a shady place to be going to like acting school. It's just not the place for like trying to learn your craft, because it's such a crappy, like this city is so crappy to work your magic. And like, and what's great is that you can meet lots of people here in this city, and you can navigate this city very easily. I feel like this is an easier city to navigate than New York. But like I don't know, sometimes
I'm from New York, so that's not true for me.
No, but like New York, I feel like is like a hard working place. Like I feel like everyone
You can
is
walk
like,
in New York.
That's true.
Yes.
That's very true. Where in New York did you grow up?
I grew up in Queens, but I was born in Harlem, and I was spent most of my time in Harlem. Later on, after I graduated, I moved to Harlem and lived in Harlem. I've lived in the Bronx, and I've lived in Brooklyn. I only haven't lived in Staten Island, but who wants to live in Staten Island?
Nobody wants to live there. What was your first? Do you remember your first movie? Like, what was the first big break?
Of course,
movie?
I remember
Yeah,
my
of course,
first
please.
movie. The very first movie that I ever did was I flew out here during my senior year. I flew out to audition for Roots 2, the second generation.
Okay.
Wow.
And I was actually auditioning to play Alex Haley as a young man before he became James L. Jones.
Oh wow.
Oh, okay.
I did not get the part. It went to Damon Evans, who was who had been established on TV.
Yeah.
He was the son on The Jeffersons.
Sure, yeah.
But Reuben Cannon, who was the casting director, kept me on, and I played one of Dr. Haley's students. But, you know, as it goes, I got cut. I had one or two lines, and it got cut. So, you know, as all of my mother's friends said, "Oh, yes, I saw him. I saw your son." No, you did not see me. But I saw me because I knew the scene I was in, and the only part of me you saw was from my neck to my waist as I passed the camera.
Your torso did a great job.
I knew that was me.
Oh God!
I'm pretty sure everyone at this table has had something like that.
Well, I had
You
that.
know,
yeah.
The first thing I ever did was I was in this terrible movie where I had 2 lines when we shot it. 1 line made it in. However, you hear me say it when you don't see me on camera. You see the reaction shot to me saying it.
So your voice made it into
Yes,
the...
Right.
but the funny thing is, there's a production still for the movie that was one of the promos, and you see me like I'm like featured in this promotional still because like the shot they used is over. It's like from behind the lead character, like him looking at like 2 people, and I'm one of the 2 people in this terrible scene in this awful movie that I'm in
Yeah.
that nobody should ever see.
Last commercial I did, forehead up.
Oh God!
Made it into the shot. I was like, I'm still getting paid. I did it.
God!
Well, I did one movie where I still have 5th billing on a single card, and the only time you ever see me is handing the phone to the star.
What movie was that?
Roadhouse.
Oh, really?
Wow!
Really?
Oh my God!
Yeah, I mean, I
Did
still
you
friends
film a lot more and it just got cut
with-
down?
I had, you know, my contract was originally for 4 weeks. That turned into 11 weeks.
Wow.
So it got me my first apartment and my first car here.
Wow.
Damn!
Could have
For
been
handing
worse.
someone a phone.
But
Yeah.
you know, 2 days after the rap party, the director called and said, "Listen, Keith, I have like 3.5 hours worth of movie that I got to cut
Oh
down
my
to
God.
2:15. So
Yeah.
Well, that
I'm sorry,
movie,
but you had to go."
that movie is so beloved. They could release the 3.5-hour cut now, and people would
Yeah,
go
people
see
would go
it.
buy it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I would definitely see that.
So, like one of the early movies in your career was The Thing. I mean, that is a
That was my
huge-
first movie.
That's the first movie.
Yeah.
Like, what a huge leap, like into movie making to have that be like the first. You know,
It was
your first movie.
fantastic. I mean, you know, what a great first experience. In fact, I don't know. I was hired for 20 weeks. That was my very first movie contract. I don't think I've been on a movie for 20 weeks since then.
Jeez.
Well, maybe I have.
Now, where did they shoot that one?
We shot it mostly at Universal.
Okay, so you
But
weren't.
but there were 3 weeks where we shot
Okay.
in Alaska.
It was
Yeah.
very convincingly Alaska through,
Yeah.
just it looked like it, And what was it like being around all those practical effects sort of creatures and stuff like that?
Oh, I mean, you know, it was my first movie, man. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, so
Time of your life.
everything was thrilling.
God.
I have to ask, what do you think your character was at the end? Human or
It
or the
wasn't me.
thing? Oh, okay.
You know, there was room for it to be either one of us. And,
Yeah.
Wow.
So we played it like it wasn't me,
Oh my
That's very
God.
cool.
Man, that's the best.
and I think Kurt also played it like it wasn't him.
Yeah.
But it-
okay.
But it could have been.
Yeah.
What was your relationship like with Kurt Russell on that set? What was that like between you guys?
Wonderful man, and really a great actor. I mean, I actually learned a lot watching those guys because, you know, as a matter of fact, I got the job right after, you know, I'm a speech teacher. So I was doing my speech teacher training when I had to leave a week early to come start to rehearse the thing. And because, I mean, if you remember, Childs didn't have a whole, you know, he had a lot of one-liners.
Yep.
It was like,
Right.
hell no, you know. So, and because I was, you know, studying to teach good American speech for the theater,
Right.
when I had these lines like, hell no, and, you know, who's that, you know. And again, like I said, my background's the theater, so it was my first time on a soundstage. I'd never been on a soundstage before.
Oh yeah.
These huge ceilings, and we're sitting in the middle of a room rehearsing, and I'm working with all these, you know, really great actors who, you know, everybody had done something before, and I was amazed and, you know, I don't, for toots, because I'm sitting across the table as far as I am from you, and there were people talking like this. I don't know. This is
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I can't hear him. And so when it came to my, lines, like I said, I had these these 2-word lines, and you would hear me going, "Oh hell no!" So at the lunch break, the fellas took me out to lunch, and Richard Masser said, "You don't have to project that much. It's okay."
Microphones.
And I was like, "Wow, okay." I just, but and it's a lesson that I still have to learn today. I mean, sometimes I still have to just bring it.
Oh yeah.
Now, what was
You're
like
doing the
working
right
with-
thing, playing to the last audience member at the end of the house.
Oh my
Yeah.
god! Like
What was John Carpenter like to work for?
I love working with John. Very efficient. I mean, I just it was this was my first big movie, so he's very clear. I mean, we rehearsed for 2 weeks, just trying to get the script as right as possible, and as I remember, and how memory is, but as I remember, Kurt Russell, Richard Masser, Charlie Hallahan, these guys were like sci-fi buffs, and they had really very smart as far as scripts and how they script structure and stuff.
Sure.
And also big sci-fi buffs. So, in any movie, but especially a sci-fi movie, you will believe anything. You will believe the world that we're in as long as there's something that doesn't come in to violate the premise.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, that
So
makes sense.
we kept trying to tweak and fix and blah, blah, and these guys were really smart about that. Well, if this is true and this is true, then this can't happen, blah, blah, blah. So we did that for 2 weeks. Finally, John said, "Look, fellas, this is the script. This is what we're going to go with."
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Well, I'm glad they did that because that's one thing that sort of throws me out. As a big fan of the sci-fi genre, whenever you see these movies and then they're internally inconsistent,
Yeah.
that really bothers
God,
me watching them.
Well,
so
that's
I'm really
what, and
happy
that's
to
and
do
that was the point that they were making, and
Yeah.
and so but there does come a time where you can't rewrite the whole script,
Yeah.
and so finally, and it wasn't that much, it's just these little things,
Well,
Yeah.
it paid off because it's still like
Still a
it
classic.
holds up. They show it every year, at least 3 times a year.
Well,
here in
it
LA.
didn't. I think because Poltergeist came out that year. There was something else, but E.T. eclipsed everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And the thing, it was. I think they wanted it to be the big summer moneymaker that year, so it all came out. Nobody asked me, but in my opinion, it should have come out in October,
Yeah.
November.
Yeah.
It should have been like a Thanksgiving film, but
Like
it
a
came
horror
out
movie.
it came out in the summertime, and of course, like I said, E.T. was still running strong, and it was not very well accepted. I remember one review said, "Oh, this isn't for kids," and I thought to myself, "Well, don't take your damn kids."
Yeah, I know. John Carpenter had issues with that, with the way that movie was received. But I think, it's become such it's such a standard now in like why practical effects is more important, for movies.
Oh, yeah.
20 years later, I mean, it's a great hit. I mean, it's the movie that we made that we wanted to make. It's closer to the original story, which is a sci-fi story called Who Goes There, and it's closer to that story than like the original thing, which is also a great movie.
Yeah.
But that was a big propaganda movie. Look
Yeah.
to the sky, the Russians are coming.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like when you first when you get a big gig like this and you go from theater to doing a big movie, carrying all that, theater stuff in you that says like, oh, I got to do my own stunts and I'm gonna kick ass. I'm gonna memorize the entire script, and I'm gonna project to the back. Like when I started doing this kid show, this Nickelodeon kid show, first week they wanted me to run and cannonball into the pool, and they said, you're not gonna actually do the cannonball. We're gonna have you're gonna run up and then you're gonna stop, and then we're gonna have a stunt guy cannonball into the pool, and then you're gonna pop your head out of the water. And I was like, what? I don't need to do that. I can do the whole thing. It's no big deal. And they were like, no, we'll get a stunt guy. It's not a big deal. And I was like, I don't think I need a stunt guy for a cannonball. And they were like, guys, they were like, Steven, the pool is only 5 feet deep. You're gonna hit the bottom and you're gonna hurt yourself. And I was like, well, let's see how it goes. And they were like, all right, fine. And I ran up in my little bathing suit and I did a cannonball, landed on my left hip, and was black and blue from my back all the way down to my leg. And I came out of the water and they were like, are you okay? And I was like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Get the stunt guy. And because like those transitions of like, not projecting. Like I one time I did a play in Chicago, and the Chicago Sun-Times said Stephen Glickman is loud, was like in the review. And then you go to do TV and you're just shouting and yelling top of your lungs because you've built this whole career on performing to the back of a
and you're not even shouting, but that's just
no, it's just like how it is. You went from doing this movie to doing Platoon. Is that correct?
Yes.
What I know that we're gonna get to this quickly, but what an amazing film, and that must have been such an incredible experience. Where did you shoot that? Do you remember?
We
where
shot
you
that in the Philippines.
Whew, my God, what an unbelievable piece of work.
Again, I thought after the thing, I got some, pretty good honorable mention in it, and as the reviews went. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll have a life in the movies. That would be nice. That's one of the things I've always wanted. Well, I didn't work again in the movies for 4 years. And my next film was Platoon. And it came about, there was a script out. I think originally Dino De Laurentiis was the producer. And there was a script out called The Platoon. And I remember because Mary Calhoun, who was the casting director, had called me in for this. And I was reading for the role of Doc. Well, I went in for the reading, and then somehow the film got shit-canned. Just nothing happened with it. I guess it was about 2 years later. Now we have another producer, and I go in again. And it was called Platoon, and I didn't really associate the two. I thought, this is a different movie. But when I got the sides, I'm like, this seems strangely familiar. So I went in for the role of Doc again, and this time I'm reading for Oliver. And he said, no, listen, come back tomorrow, and I want you to read the role of King. I don't want you for Doc. I want you for Doc. So, okay, I came in the next day, and I read, and he said, great. He said, it's great to see somebody who looks like what I wrote. As far as I'm concerned, the part is yours. And I'm like,
wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm thinking, yeah, right, And this was a stupid faux pas, my agent at the time had met Oliver. And he told me, listen, when you see him, tell him that I said hello. Well, sometimes my memory for names really gets... So once he said that, I said, oh, and by the way, my agent told me to tell you hello. He said, who's your agent? What's his name? And I went, and he was new. He was literally...
No.
And I went,
oh, no.
He said, yeah, fine, right, go ahead. Listen, if you tell him to give me a good deal on you, that's all. And I'm like...
Wow.
And I went out going, oh, stupid.
Oh my God!
And then I also went out thinking, this is, it's Hollywood, people don't keep their word. Yeah, right, I got a part. So, but an hour later, I called my agent, and he had already made me the offer.
Wow!
Damn,
That's great.
That's incredible.
Now, when you're filming Platoon, do you go out and party with Charlie Sheen at some point during that filming? Like any wild stories like that?
Not that I would discuss with you here. But we, it was a fantastic cast. And a great time. As you know, practically everybody in that film has now, from 30 years have
huge
career.
Yeah.
And rightly so, because they were really some wonderful actors.
This really interests me though. You said 4 years in between in between those jobs. What did you do for those 4 years? Like
I went back to the theater.
Yeah,
That's what
I'm talking about. That's the smart thing to do.
I was one, who still. I mean, I was never afraid to go out of town to take a job. If I got offered a good part in a great play, if it's in Detroit, if it's in Sheboygan, I was going to go.
Hell yeah!
And that's what I did.
What was one of your favorite plays that you did?
Oh God. One of my very favorites was, I've been going back and forth. I'm shooting, the last thing I just did a series called Greenleaf, which shot in Atlanta. Well, my first time in Atlanta was 1984. I think it was like 1984, which was before Platoon. And I was playing Macheath in the Three Penny Opera, which was one of the great experiences of my life.
Is there
that sounds cool?
Time.
I would love to have seen that.
Seriously.
Oh, it was great. It was set in Harlem in the 1930s.
Yeah.
So that's how the music, the music was orchestrated. It was the costumes. It was fantastic.
Did you ever work with Ken Page or with Billy Porter, any of those guys?
As a matter of fact, Billy, I had just come from Pittsburgh. Playing Othello. That was my second season in Pittsburgh, and I had not the greatest experience in the world. It was, and so I was quite arrogant, I think, in those days, and I had such a, one of the actors I was playing with, whose name I won't mention, but if I ever saw his name, if I ever saw his name, he's the only person in my life. If I ever saw his name in a movie or in a piece of theater, if I had to have any scenes with him, I would not take the job.
Wow.
But that's the only person in my life that I can say that.
Was it
about.
William Shatner? No. I'm gonna start
And
guessing.
so
That's still a pretty good record.
After that,
not
and
bad.
I was like 28 years old, and I just hated myself for how I just playing with him just made me not want to be there.
Sure.
And so I retired from the theater. I just said I don't want to act anymore. I hated myself for being in judgment. Because if you're on stage judging how people are acting with you, then where is your head at?
That doesn't work.
And I hated myself for that. I hated having to feel that way about people. So I decided I'm not going to act anymore.
Yeah.
So I went to teach. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, before I went to Juilliard, I went to Purchase.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I got kicked out of Purchase after the first year. But during that period, I went back to Purchase to teach speech.
Yeah.
I was the assistant speech teacher. And Billy Porter was in one of those classes.
God.
I don't know if I got to coach him or not. But anyway, he was in that, but
Very talented gentleman.
yeah.
All right, so we're getting to a film that I think is near and dear to all three of us. I'm sure it's near and dear to you as well. They Live, one of the greatest films, I believe, one of the greatest films of all time.
Yeah.
Can we talk about this movie for a little bit?
Absolutely.
I actually just rewatched it. It was on Showtime last week. I watched the whole damn thing all over again. From the
Have you ever seen the South Park version?
No.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
So good.
It's shot for shot.
Yes.
The fight scene is shot for
Yeah, it's
shot.
the same
It's not
thing, yeah.
recreation.
God.
It's very funny.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It really is.
That movie's one of the most insane. That movie got me it really got me into wanting to make movies and come to LA and
Well,
work. I loved that movie.
I love that movie because it's probably more resonant and significant in its overtones today
Yes.
Yeah.
than it was then. In fact, the whole. It was very Orwellian in this in the sense about being watched and all the subliminal messages. And it was very interesting. Because it was pre-DVD era, but it was just on the cusp. They were just talking about DVDs. It was number one in the theater across the country for 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
And then all of a sudden, you couldn't find it anywhere. It was not in a theater in Podunk.
Wow.
It was nowhere. And I thought, what happened?
Yeah.
I mean, we were doing so well. Well, I called Sandy, the producer, and I said, do you know what happened? She said, well, maybe we pissed somebody off. But it was...
So it was just mysteriously pulled.
It was just mysteriously pulled after 2 weeks.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's really interesting.
We're all going to be assassinated.
Never found out what
happened. We're all going to die today. Like
I said, if you look at the message, inside the movie,
man,
it is so resonant today.
Absolutely.
And now than it was then.
God.
What was it like filming the fight sequence? The legendary fight
again,
sequence?
That was again one of the red letters in my life. I got to work with a guy who became a great buddy, Roddy Piper.
The late great Roddy Piper.
The late great Roddy Piper.
God bless him.
He was phenomenal. He was phenomenal. Pound for pound, like the strongest guy I ever been around. And I was weighing about 230 at the time, 225, 230. And while we were rehearsing, he would literally pick me up and he would stand there holding me. And
oh my God!
What should I do with him? And he taught me a few moves, and so that I still remember today. And
oh, that's cool.
Did you guys choreograph the fight yourself?
No,
or
Jeff Imada was the choreographer and the fight coordinator. He was phenomenal. I mean, we rehearsed it for about 2 weeks. And just got it really down, so we were able to play, and who better to play with than Roddy Piper?
God, seriously,
I mean, it was fantastic. He taught me a whole lot about reacting and how to.
And it looks great when you watch it, like the actual the hits look.
Well,
real,
the best thing about it is that and Jeff really instilled this in us about that fight had a story of its own.
Yeah,
it had a life of its own. It had a beginning, a middle, and and it escalated. And I thought it was also kind of realistic. As you have two guys who are fighting. And then something happens. My favorite moment is when he swings the board and he breaks
the car window.
I'm like, you motherfucker!
And he goes, "I'm sorry." Like just apologizes real quick.
So but it was just great fun. Great fun.
Yeah, those are the best. The fights that when you're watching the fight, it reveals more about the characters. And that one really did. Like by the end of it, you felt like you knew both of those guys a lot better.
Yeah, as I remember, I think John fashioned that after a fight with John Wayne and Victor McLaughlin in The Quiet Man. If you remember that, it starts like at the river or something, and they fight all through the town.
God, that's incredible.
So that was sort of the model of it.
I had read somewhere that the fight was originally he had originally planned it to be shorter, but then once he saw you guys do the whole fight, they decided to keep the whole thing. Is that true, or
that I don't know? I mean, I know that the fight you saw is the fight that we rehearsed.
Yeah, well, it was amazing, and it's really an incredible fight, and it's just so fun and enjoyable, and your performance is incredible in the whole movie. I think I think across the board. Was that shot here in Los Angeles?
Right here in stinky Los Angeles, in some alley downtown. Yeah.
My God, what was if you can just. Clue us in a little bit to what it was like working with Roddy on the rest of that movie and going through the rest of that.
Oh, I mean, it was great. John, I felt that John had become a better director by that time.
I was going to say he's like firing
he was
on all cylinders.
He was really communicative, and he really knew how to work with Roddy to get a performance out of him. Roddy was very hungry and open to learning, so he would always ask me questions about acting and playing moments and stuff, and so we had a really great rapport. Like I said, we became friends, and we could talk. You don't necessarily get in the habit of telling other people how to act, or but if you ask, we can discuss the moment. And he was very open to rehearsing it, and how we could make this moment better. How we could make it clearer. And it was a joy to work with.
Wow, fantastic! That's so amazing. When you guys were filming it, how did you guys handle the black and white to the color stuff? Like, how was that? How was that shot?
That's all post stuff.
Were you guys on set with people wearing those prosthetics and doing?
Oh yeah, I mean, and that those guys were fantastic, the makeup people. And I asked John one day. I said, "Whose concept was this? How did you?" He said, "Oh, it came to me in a dream one day." And I said, "Well, I sure wouldn't want to be in your head." I mean, it was really some scary shit. You know what I mean?
Oh my God!
And that makeup was bad. Like not bad. Like it was.
No, it was
scary
badass.
bad.
Yeah.
It was. It's still like I saw a girl for Halloween. She's wore a Hooters outfit, but she was one of those, and it was so jarring. It was just terrifying.
I want to skip forward in the world of things to Spawn. Is that okay? Can we talk about?
Oh my God!
Is that when you got into voiceover work? Because your voice is so just cool. He's got a cool voice.
Yeah.
You have a real cool voice.
Like, when did you get into voiceover during this whole process?
Oh boy. I mean, again, growing up, I was a big watcher of like Animal Kingdom and a lot of documentary series. And one of the things I always wanted to do was voiceovers. I loved. One of my heroes was Percy Rodriguez. Percy played the High Commander.
Oh, okay.
In the original Star Trek.
Yeah.
He's the only brother on Star Trek.
Yeah.
And he was the high. But Percy also was the first black man to have a part in a network TV series. He and Glenn Turman were a father and son in Peyton Place.
Oh, okay.
That was a '60s series.
Yeah.
But that man had the voice. He and Don LaFontaine were the
movie trailer guys.
Movie trailer guys. Those were the go-to guys.
Yeah, sure.
But hearing him, William Conrad, John Forsythe.
Oh yeah.
These were my heroes. Listening to these voices, and I always wanted to do that. But now I've lost your question.
Also Spawn.
Oh, Spawn.
Yeah.
So
we can talk about Spawn and Disney.
But you asked me about getting into voiceovers. Then there was Adolf Caesar was one of the few black men that that were doing voiceovers. It was mostly the White Boys Club. It was not it was not open to a whole lot of brothers. But I always wanted to do it. So I had an agent who kept pushing me and promoting me. And one day I got I think my the first job, actually the first voiceover job I got was in Pittsburgh. And it was for a thing called Belfont Markets. And it was because I was doing A Midsummer Night's Dream. The agent, who was booking it, they called the theater and asked for somebody who could do Shakespeare. So they sent me over.
There you go.
And it was kind of funny because I thought the guy was a little bit, was a bit pompous or something, because he said, "This copy it's like the bank speech. I have a bank speech, in Shakespeare." And I was like, "Really?" But I mean, I kind of understand what he was going for. But I mean, comparing himself to Shakespeare, I thought was a bit.
Right. Maybe just a little.
This copy that I whipped up this afternoon.
But that was that's how I first started getting into it, and so by the time I had already done Goliath in Gargoyles,
right?
When Spawn came along, and I loved Spawn.
Yeah.
Because to me, Spawn was like Darth Vader working his way back to the Force.
Yeah.
In spite of himself.
Yeah.
Because, even though, even though, I mean, and what a great comic. I mean,
It really was.
Todd McFarlane,
Nobody's been
great.
cooler. I mean, in a long time. He's the coolest.
Because he was always, he would always wind up doing good for people, even though, he's, basically sold his soul to the devil, if I could only. And the other great thing about Spawn was Cagliostro was played by Dick Dicehart, whom I had done The Thing with.
Whoa!
So here is I have the lead in this animated series with one of the guys that I admire the most. He was really a wonderful
That's very
wonderful
cool.
actor.
That's so awesome.
I'll tell you the other, another great lesson for me on The Thing. Again, watching Kurt work, and how the power of not yelling, not having to raise your voice, and watching, how it played in the studio, and then what it was like on the screen. The other great lesson for me was Donald Moffat, and he played the commander, and there was one great. It was a great moment. If you see it again, you can see and it's when Donald has the gun, and they're telling him that we're doomed. This is it. And the shot is over my shoulder onto Donald when the world's coming to an end. And he doesn't say anything. But you could see in his face that the world has changed upon hearing that news. And he didn't do any weird facial gesticulations. He didn't mug. He didn't do anything. But, and I would kind of slide, because it was as it pushed in over my shoulder, I would slide just so I could watch him without saying a word, and his whole face flushed and then went white. Just because, and it was like, it was so powerful because and with the camera there, you don't have to do a whole lot.
It's the power of the close-up.
If you think it, if your mind is in the right place, it just shows up on your face. It's one of those, Norma Desmond moments. She says, "We didn't need voices, we had faces."
Oh my God. I'd love to chat with you a little bit about Hercules, about doing that movie with Disney.
Can I say one more thing about Spawn before we move on?
Well,
to that?
of course,
I'm
man.
sorry.
You can say as many things you want about Spawn.
I had been reading that comic for about 3 years before the show aired.
Mm-hmm.
And in the first teaser, they had Spawn speak, and I was like, that's what he sounds like. And like in my head, it was already what I'd been hearing. Right. It creeped me out. It was so cool. I was like, that had never happened on any cartoon before. It was a geeky thing, but I had to bring it up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, like we've been telling people all week, very quietly that we have you coming to do the show, and that was the number one thing that we kept hearing from all of our wonderful Comic-Con friends. We're like, "Oh my God, you got the voice of Spawn! You got the voice of Spawn!" It's like the coolest.
I think I was talking to. I want to say I was talking to Howard Stern once, and I recorded something for him as Spawn.
Yeah.
You've reached this number. If you don't leave a message, I'm going to kick your ass.
God, that's amazing.
That gave me chills. That's awesome.
That's incredible. When you went on to work for Disney on Hercules, you got to work with Ron Clements, the director, who is like a legend at Disney. He directed, I don't know if you guys know this, he directed Aladdin, he directed Little Mermaid. I mean, the guy's a legend at Disney.
Yeah.
You got to tell me what it was like working with him. He's incredible.
I've been blessed and highly favored, extremely fortunate. I'm not going to say I've never done something I didn't like, but, when you ask me, what was my favorite project, it's hard to pick because that was, again, with Dr. Facilier. I mean, one of the great moments of my life. I always wanted to do that kind of character. I grew up with Snidely Whiplash, and Dishonest John. Yeah, Dishonest John. And I was so happy to get that job because we had to sing for the audition, and I brought in a friend of mine to play for me, and the song I sang was from Hans Christian Andersen. There once was an ugly duckling with hairs all curly and brown, and the other birds, and so many words said, "Get out of town." But Hans Christian Andersen was one of those movies that made me know I wanted to be an actor, and I saw that as a kid, and so I thought it was a beautiful synchronicity to get that job from having sung that song.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And then working with those guys, because we recorded that over like 6 months, going back in the studio and coming back, and what a joy! It was fantastic.
So cool. Susan Egan and James Woods and everybody. Oh my God, are you kidding me? That cast, was incredible, man. We got to get to a couple more because there's a couple more that we had talked about getting to, but very quickly, just rewatched There's Something About Mary. You're so funny in that movie.
How'd
Holy
the Franks
crap.
get above the beams?
Oh my God. Just unbelievable. And Stiller like crushing it. And you're so funny in that movie. It's amazing, man. I love watching, like you go watch like something like They Live or Platoon or The Thing, and then you go and watch There's Something About Mary, and you're like, this guy can do everything. Like it's amazing. That must have been so much fun.
Do you prepare differently for something like that?
For comedies than for dramas or big scary movies?
You go to work, man. You do what you do what the demand is, right? I've always heard that you have to work harder at comedies than you do for something serious or dramas. And comedy is harder in that sense because all really good comedy comes out of the great depth of truth of it.
Sure.
You believe that could happen, and then you heighten it. It's like when you're doing a musical, and suddenly you have to burst into song. It's because the reality is so heightened. There's nothing else to do but sing it.
Right, exactly. Which I do all day. Like it just.
Yes.
I believe in Life, the musical. Here we are, sitting in the station.
Oh my God, man!
You had a line in Something About Mary that I didn't hear until I saw it at home because the scene was getting so many laughs. But it's when they're taking Ben Stiller away in the ambulance, and you just barely, right before the scene cuts, you hear you say, "This never would have happened to Woogie." And that just cracked me up the first time I heard it.
Oh my God. Was that in the script? Was that part of it?
I don't remember.
Oh, it's all right. Don't worry about it. All right. One of the most insane films. It's been voted many, many times as a movie that you literally cannot watch twice because it is so incredibly intense to watch. I've seen it at least 5 times. Requiem for a Dream, which you were in that film, and what a absolutely fucking terrifying movie. Just so incredible and so insane. And those performances, Jennifer Connelly and Jared Leto and everybody that you worked with on that. Can we talk a little bit about that? Would you mind telling us a little bit about what it was like working on that film?
It was fantastic. I don't want to overuse that word.
No.
But again, Darren Aronofsky.
What's he like?
I would work with him again in a heartbeat. And you've seen some of the films after that. The other films he did before that, Best in Show and Pie. He's just a great filmmaker, and I loved that character. I had made a decision for myself not to play, black man as scuzzball just because it's there, because I didn't want to, perpetuate stereotypes that,
Sure.
And so I didn't want to. I wasn't going to do drug dealers and blah 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 blah. But when this came along, I was happy to do it because he was not your average punk ass selling, crack for $5 on the corner. No. He was a guy. He was selling drugs to your stockbroker, to your lawyer. He was a businessman.
Yeah. The scariest kind of businessman.
And that was the point for me. This guy was a businessman. He didn't go to jail. He didn't have any. He was smart.
Yeah.
And he didn't use.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very important to me because behind all the lives of these people who we usually vilify, if you're a scumbag, you're a scumbag. But there are some guys who are smart. I mean, I don't by in any means condone selling drugs for a living. But if you're going to sell drugs, this is the way to do it.
Wow.
And when I liked him because he was smart. Now it's interesting to me that no one ever says that Jennifer's character was a scuzzball.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But my guy is the bad guy. He's the scuzzball.
Yeah.
But right. I didn't knock on her door.
Yeah.
I didn't pick up the phone call talking to somebody I don't know to make an appointment.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And as far as he's concerned, it was about business, cash, grass, or ass. What do you? This ain't no freebie here.
Yeah, it's a transaction.
That's what you do. Now, is it taking advantage of her addiction? No, she had a choice.
Yeah,
you could have said no.
Yeah, that's the way to approach a character like that. Really,
like I said, I don't condone his way of living, but if you're going to go that route, you don't want to be somebody who has to hire a lawyer every 10 minutes because you're in and out of prison.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you can't half-ass that kind of life.
No, you have to be smarter about that, and and those guys do exist. And they have a right to be portrayed as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Absolutely. And the way that you portrayed it was phenomenal. I mean,
but again, he's a business guy.
Yeah. Sort of like if you watch,
there's a demand, and he takes care of it.
It's sort of like if you watch The Wire, like Idris Elba's character in that series was very like he's a business guy who's just trying. It just happens his business is selling drugs.
Mm-hmm.
But
sure.
I mean, everything about that character in that show is that way. And then you see that sort of contrasted with sort of like different sort of like street type dealers, or then the people who are really making money off of the people selling drugs, who aren't necessarily directly involved in that, but they know what's going on. They're just
and that's where
money,
you get great acting performances.
Oh, yeah.
Is like, I mean, the same thing with Boardwalk Empire. Like we saw that a lot on Boardwalk, where it was, like you're not vilifying this character because the actor playing the character, even though the character might be kind of a villain or kind of a bad guy, sort of like they're not playing them as a bad guy. They're playing them as a human being with real thoughts, real.
That's
emotions
why we fell in love with Tony Soprano. I mean, because
100%.
This is the guy. I mean, I don't believe that you really. I don't have to necessarily on the outside of it love the guy that I'm playing.
Yeah.
Right.
Or what he does.
Absolutely.
But while I'm trying to find his humanity, I don't hate him.
Yeah.
Unless you're playing a guy who hates himself.
Yeah.
And then you even have to find what about himself that he hates. But somebody loves him. He's got a mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
If he in fact has a woman, has a relationship, and there's any love in it at all, like Tony Soprano, he didn't come home and kick his wife and beat the dog,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
There's even bad guys have hearts.
Yeah, it's like arguably,
and they beat.
They're doing
red
that
blood.
stuff for those people, know.
Now, at some point, you got involved in the video game world. Now,
did you ever? I mean, he's a huge fan of your voice work in Halo. I'm a huge fan
Saints
of
Row.
your work in Saints Row because
Yeah.
I played every
Both
single
those.
one of them.
Played all those games. Yeah.
Especially the last one where it was like
So
the
ridiculous.
ridiculous with the
superheroes
vice
or whatever,
president. And all
Right.
that. I mean, my God, it
Well,
was so damn cool.
With Rowdy. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, completely. Yeah.
I
come
think
on,
someone
let's
should mention Mass Effect.
Mass
Yes,
Effect,
So-
yes,
Mass
great
Effect.
one.
Are you kidding
I'll come
me?
in on that one.
And you did the first Fallout game,
Yeah, the
Yeah.
very first
which
Fallout.
now it's
Yeah.
sort of become iconic for Ron Perlman to be the narrator in that show. But you were the
Yeah.
the first voice in Fallout.
Mhm.
So how did you find your way into the world of video games? Is it because you did Spawn and you'd done Gargoyles, and they said we want that voice for this, or
Somebody offered me a job.
okay?
Well, what's the process of doing a voice in something like Saints Row or something like this? Like, is it the same as doing a movie, or are you?
The great thing about the progression of things, video games, as you know, they sell better than movies.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you've yet to see a movie in the first week make $500 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. Video games do that.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I think it does happen because the state of animation, the way they draw the games, the way they animate the games. I mean, they're like mini movies.
Yeah, they look incredible.
And that allow you to participate.
Mm-hmm.
They're interactive, and the animation. I mean, some of that stuff is phenomenal. You look at those games. It's like. Whoosh.
Have you played any of the games you've done voices for? Like, have you played Saints Row and seen yourself in the game?
I'm not a big gamer. I played enough to say, I made an attempt at the game.
Did they motion capture stuff of you? Did they
I've not done any motion capture stuff.
Mhm.
I don't. Maybe I have. I don't remember. Because I've done some motion capture for some things, but probably a game.
I know we have to wrap up things soon, but I do want to talk about the Cape, which I loved. I loved that damn
Man,
show.
let me tell you something.
Please talk to us about that show.
It's interesting that you bring it up because I was saying to myself today that among the great characters that I've played, Max Malini is one of my heroes. I mean,
Yeah.
I love that man.
It was a
I
damn
love
good show.
that man, and I thought it was a great show.
Yeah.
And the wide appeal of it. I have walked down the street. I think I was in New York, and these kids were over here. Not kids; they were in their 20s, from Italy. And I was walking in the streets. He goes, "Excuse me, Maximiliani," and I was like, "Wow,
That's great.
yeah,
Whoa.
man, you know
Oh
that
my
the
God.
Cape." Yes, it was. I mean, that's wow. That was
Such
a
a
gift. It was
badass
gift.
show.
It was
Oh my
yeah.
God, it was phenomenal. Like everybody involved in that. Like David Lyons was
Yeah.
super cool. Did you guys have a good time?
Oh,
on
we
set
had.
together?
Your
costume was so
loved,
awesome.
Loved
Your whole like layer was super cool. It was like, damn, that was such a great show.
Bob Blackman, who did the costumes. I mean, and Bob Blackman is a guy. I mean, he did Star Trek for years.
Yeah.
But when I first came to California in '77, he was doing costumes up at the Pacific Conservatory for the Performing Arts in Santa Maria.
Oh yeah,
And
totally.
that's when I
PCPA.
met him. That's where I met Bob Blackman, who did the costumes
Wow.
for the Cape.
God, what a phenomenal piece of work.
Yeah.
That's so cool. How did that season go down? Like, what was it like working on that show?
It was great. They were. I gotta say, it came. I was the last guy cast, and there were several other guys up for it. Name people who you would know, and it was right down to the very. In fact, I was hired the day before I had to shoot.
Wow.
It was a last minute decision. I'm glad they made a decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
You never know how those things are going to go, but that was another blessing. God is good every day and all the time.
That's so phenomenal. There's a documentary that you did. You produced this documentary. Creature feature 50 years. Gilman. Now, me and Mike actually went to what theater was it to go watch Creature from the Black Lagoon with the cast. Remember, it was
I don't remember.
New Beverly. It was New
Yes,
Beverly.
yes.
And it was so cool. Like, we're huge fans of that time. How did you end up getting involved in that doc? And can people watch it? Where can they see it?
I'm not sure where you can get it at. Maybe on the Netflix kind of thing. But some friends of mine approached me about it. It was extremely ultra low budget, But I also am a fan of the creature, and so I did it.
So cool.
And who and the guys that worked on it, I got to say they persevered long, for years to keep it going, and I think it's gotten some kind of an award, recently.
Well,
so
as we're wrapping this up, what do you have going on what are you working on right now? Is there something
I just finished working on a series called Greenleaf, where I play Pastor Greenleaf for the OWN network.
Very cool.
And Greenleaf is about the first family of a mega church. And it really is a family drama. The church happens to be the family business.
Oh.
So it's about all the relationships in the family, it's really, backstage behind the church,
Did you meet
what
Oprah?
happens. I did. As a matter of fact, she plays my sister-in-law.
Oh, very cool.
What? Oh my
Wow.
God, that's incredible.
It really is.
Everything in me just fought against myself for asking, "Oh, was she nice?" That's like.
As a matter of fact, she's very nice.
I'm sure she is.
Yes.
I'm sure. Did she give away a room full of cars?
Yeah.
At any
Did
point
she
in
say, "You
time?
get a
Is
car"?
that
Not
right?
at this time. But who knows?
At some point, everyone may get a caravan. That's so incredible. Where can people watch that show?
You can watch this on the OWN network, coming June 21st and 22nd. On the 21st, you'll see episode 1 and 2, and on the 22nd, you'll see episode 3, and then it will air every Wednesday after that.
Oh, very cool.
So
Wow.
damn cool. All right.
The Nice Guys. Don't
Yes.
forget
Oh
about
my
that.
God.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
The
watch
Nice
out
Guys.
for the Nice Guys opening on the 20th?
The 20th.
The 20th,
Right.
yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I saw it at the American Cinematheque. The Alamo Drafthouse did a screening of it. Phenomenal movie. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
And just one quick question: where do you keep your Emmys?
On the mantelpiece.
I was wondering.
All right. Before we wrap up, I know I've said that like 6 times, but before we wrap up, you just have such a huge career with so many wonderful facets. You were in a movie called Cloud Atlas, which I saw in the theater. It was the most insane thing I've ever seen. I don't know. I still kind of know what happened. I'm not 100% sure. And everyone played multiple characters. The cast is outrageous. And it's the Wachowski brothers, sisters.
Siblings.
Now,
Sisters now. Yeah.
Siblings.
Yes,
Yeah.
siblings.
That's a good way
Yeah.
to siblings.
Siblings. Wachowski siblings, who did The Matrix. And you played a bunch of different characters in that. How do you even prepare for something like that?
Fortunately, I didn't have to play more than one character a day, so that was great. I don't really think anyone did, but that may not be true. I mean, they may have had to do one part of the day as one character and maybe another. But I don't think anybody had to do more than one character in a day, and it was what a great experience.
Was that a lot of green screen work on that one?
There was a lot of green screen going on. There was some green screen stuff going on. But,
Where
you know,
were
we were in mostly in Berlin, but we shot also in Mallorca, and other a couple of people went different places. That's where I was. I was in a Dieseldorf maybe or something like that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there were some beautiful locations in the
Oh.
movie.
Yeah, film looks fantastic.
Fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
isn't it a great look? And one of the most wonderful things about it was who would think that there were 3 directors?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, it's just so seamless the way it goes and jumps from one era to another, and one
Yeah.
century to another.
Is that the most extreme location that you've been on, or what's the most extreme location that you've had to work under, like for a film?
I think Thailand, because when I did a movie called The Fifth Commandment,
Mhm.
and it was pretty intensely hot, and we were in some pretty intense places, but again, that was another character that I absolutely loved. I played. I can't remember his name right now, but he was a fixer.
Okay.
I think that's what they called him. And he's he would travel around and fix things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was and on the side he was a jazz musician. He was a trumpet player. But you know, when the situation called for, he would
take care of
that. He carried that trumpet. You know what else he carried in that trumpet case?
Right.
You know.
As we wrap up here, is there? I know that you've done a lot of theater in your life. Is there a play or a musical or something like in the theater that you have not done that you would like to do? Just
I want to play the Man of La Mancha more than God hates sin.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, somebody out
Very
there.
good choice.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do.
Hey, La Jolla Playhouse.
Yeah.
Pull
Get it
your shit together.
Yeah. Hey.
Get Keith David,
Somebody.
for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Someone get Keith David, Man of La Mancha.
Yeah.
Well, we have to have him back.
Yeah. There's
Because-
so.
we didn't even
Like,
touch
we didn't
on
even-
Ken Burns.
I didn't even get to ask him about Pitch Black. There's so much.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
that,
So many things.
There's
Oh.
a ton of different things.
Is there
you know.
anything in particular you want to ask before we wrap up?
Not
Mike?
that
We
can
need
do
more
in
time.
5 seconds.
The things I want to talk about, we
But
need more
yeah.
time. So
All right.
Exactly.
All right, guys.
Next
Well,
time.
listen. You're incredible for being here and for hanging out with us. Are you on social media? Can people find you on?
You
the
can
internet?
find me on social media.
Thanks again so much for being here. We really appreciate everything that you do, and we can't wait to see what you do next because it's going to be just as amazing and just as incredible as everything else.
it's
that
like
you've
everything
done.
he does is good too. That's the crazy thing.
I know.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, that ain't always true, but
Yeah.
I appreciate your saying so.
Right.
Thanks again for
right.
checking out the nighttime show, and don't forget to subscribe and leave comments about the amazing Keith David. We love you, buddy. Thanks again.
All right, thank you, man.
You bet.
Thank you.
That was amazing, guys. Keith David, so incredible, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Oh.
We didn't get to half the stuff we wanted to talk to him about. That's how
He's
long
led
his career.
such a life.
He didn't leave. By the way, he literally just vanished into the chair. Like he
Yeah.
just.
He's
we were
that
like,
good an actor.
yeah, we thought he was here the whole time, and he just wasn't. He just
Wow.
maybe it was just a hologram. I don't know. God,
I still want to hear that Charlie Sheen story.
Yeah,
There's
so do
something
I.
there.
I love
Yeah,
that you
know
said
what?
that.
We
There's
never
something
even
there.
got to Men at Work.
Yeah.
And we'll have round 2. We have to have a round
Yeah, we got to
2.
have a round 2 with him. He's
yeah,
too damn
there
cool.
must be. I mean, with all the people he's worked with some people who are known for being amazing.
Yeah.
And he's worked with some people who are known for being nightmares.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to find out a little more about the nightmares because
And
the
some
first
that
time
are
you meet
like
somebody,
amazing nightmares.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, like he seems so polite about talk. Like anytime he would mention someone that he didn't like working with, he wouldn't say their name. Like he was so.
like I want to know who was that guy.
I
in
know. I
Atlanta.
want to get in deeper.
Well,
I
now-
got it. Now
What we
can-
need to do next time is have some Fireball whiskey here.
Yes. That's
Load
a
him up.
Very good idea.
And then get him talking.
What we
what
got
a
to do.
smart
we got
idea.
to trick him into that.
You know,
What we
that's
really need to do, we need to find him on another podcast and have somebody ask him about being on the nighttime show and see what he says.
ah.
and then
there
you'll
we
know
go.
what he really thinks.
If he doesn't
Yeah.
mention us by name, we'll
Yeah,
know.
we're like,
Then,
oh.
you know.
Yes, exactly. I think that's a very good idea, and I think, Mike, we should have Fireball like here, just so that people can like do shots and kind of loosen up a little bit, because
Yeah,
that's what it does to me. Earlier today, I did a shot in the middle of the day, and I was pretty toasty for quite some time.
I picked him up to come here tonight, and he
Yeah.
was like acting all weird, and we're like, What's wrong with you?
And I was like, I might be a little bit drunk and a little bit sexy. You know, it's just that's when I drink Fireball, I become
You were right
that
on
guy.
one count.
Right.
you're.
I'm
not.
a little bit drunk. I'm a little bit country. That's what I become.
No, you
when
did morning radio today.
I did. I did the Heidi and Frank show,
Mm-hmm.
which was the coolest. It was so much damn fun. And the Heidi and Frank show, which is KLOS,
Mm-hmm.
95.5, they gave away like 5 pairs of tickets to the nighttime show live, which is every month at the Hollywood Improv. You got to go to the Hollywood Improv website and check out the calendar. You'll always see our show. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
It's like,
you have to come.
you got to come to the show. This we're about to do the show with Tom Segura, Dane Cook, Helen Hong, DJ Doug Pound, who's actually Doug Lussenhop, who's the editor of Tim and Eric Awesome Show, great job. Eric Andre show, Portlandia. He's gonna be our musical guest. He's doing like a funny DJ character, and then our special guest for the night, which is super exciting, is Bill Farmer, who is the voice of Goofy. We had him on the podcast.
You've heard on the podcast.
Wow. Yeah, you heard him on the podcast, and he was super cool to have on. And we're doing a whole bit where we do a scene from Pulp Fiction together, and it's going to be amazing.
Oh, that'll be cool.
Yeah,
I missed him on the podcast, so I'll finally.
Oh yeah, you weren't here. We had Josh Sussman in.
Yeah, I know.
It was so funny. I mean, the guy, he's an incredible voice guy, and getting him to come do a live show is something he does not do. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, and then we just found out today that we're throwing Greg Louganis.
We're gonna do something with Greg Louganis.
Yeah, we're gonna throw him into the mix.
Olympic
gold
American hero.
American hero. Thank you. Gold medalist Greg Louganis is joining us also on the Nighttime Show. But we didn't advertise that. That is just a secret that you guys are knowing and that I know.
Well, by the time you're listening to this, it's already
by
happened.
the time you're listening to this, it's already happened. This
is
happening.
Or it hasn't happened, and we're lying to you right now because who knows what might happen in 2 days.
Yeah, you know what?
We don't want you stressing out about this big secret that you're having
Don't be stressed out. All right, that's the last thing.
Yeah. Shh! Don't tell anyone. It's a secret.
What happens in the past happens in the future. That's what the Nighttime Show is all about.
No,
it's not. Not
that's because it doesn't make any sense.
Listen, I have emotional problems.
That is a thing.
That is a real thing. Guys, this has been so incredible. If you want to follow Keith David, you can find him Facebook and Twitter at I'm Keith David. It's I am Keith. Keith. I'm still had some fireball.
Holy shit!
I am Keith David is Twitter and Facebook, and then on Instagram it's at.
Why would you spell Keith but not spell David if you're going to spell the whole thing out? It's at IMKEITHDAVID.
I'm telling you, there's fireballs flowing through my system. It's in my veins. It's in my vein. On Instagram, it's at Silver Throat.
Oh, that's a cool name.
He's so damn cool.
Yeah, I wish I sounded like that so bad.
I know, so do I.
You know what I bet? I bet like back in the 70s, right, before he's married and all that stuff.
Right.
He's the kind of guy who
he was
called
pulling
like
so much ass.
Like no, I'm just saying like you know they had those phone dating lines back before like the internet and stuff. He's the guy who could call and be like, "Hey, call me. I'm in box 317 or whatever." You know what I mean? He'll just like get flooded.
Yeah.
Flooded
God,
with women.
Matt, you're so old.
You don't remember those things?
No,
that was like a thing.
He had box 317, and they had to give him box 318 and 319 just for the overflow.
Yeah.
I love it. That's absolutely hysterical. Matt, where can people find you on the internet?
You can go to funnymatt.com. I've got all my links on there, and find me, follow me.
Yeah, I will.
Do good things. Watch my special on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, go on the place and watch the special. Stop it. Shut up and watch it. What about you, Michael Blacks?
At Mike Black Attack on all social media. And you can see my special live at Nick's Check Cashing. Anytime you're in there, I just do it for fun.
You just perform
for the broke.
Oh, wow.
Comedy for the broke.
How much does it cost to watch?
It's free. It's free.
Free show?
If you're eating ramen, you can share it with me.
Wow.
So
watch me on Amazon Prime. Every time you watch me on Amazon Prime, it costs you nothing, and I get 8 cents.
Right.
Wow.
So you should do that.
Well,
it adds up.
I'm sure it does.
That's what it adds up to. 8 cents. That's what it adds up to.
8 whole cents. Yeah. So 16 cents so far is how many.
So far, that's how much it's made.
Made
me and my mother.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, dear God. You can always find me at Stephen Glickman, STEPHEN Glickman on...
Why do you spell out the first and not the second?
STEPHEN GLICKMAN. I'm telling you, Fireball is running through my veins.
My baloney has a first name. It's Stephen Glickman.
Stephen Glickman. I'm pretty sure that's not how you're supposed to do it. You can find me on all social media, Instagram, Twitter, and of course, YouTube. This has been the Nighttime Show podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave comments and repost and tell all your friends.
And give us a good review.
Yeah, give us a good review. Stop being such an asshole, all right? And give us a damn good review. I love you guys.